So at this point, that's going to be enough to win the ball game or today, and we'll see if we get another body there, then we'll use that body too. So, everybody's kind of banged up at this point, and there's a lot of spots that we're trying to manipulate in the roster, and so we're going to go to war with the guys that we got right now. So that's who we have. That's who we'll play with.
What was your message to the team after Sunday? What did you say to them?
Again, honestly, it felt like deja vu to last year up there, to be honest with you. And it's just, again, it was just disappointed that we didn't execute the way we, talked about executing. And, just in general, if we give our best shot and we play our game, and lose to a team beats us because they're better, they made some plays that we didn't make or something, that's one thing. But, when we make a lot of mistakes and do a lot of things that are just uncharacteristic of how we had been playing, it's frustrating. It's just disappointing because it's just, I'd rather, like I said, I'd rather kind of go toe-to-toe and have our best shot and have their best shot and hey, they make a couple plays that we didn't make, then fine. But it was disappointing that, especially all week we had talked about kind of poise and execution, and just, do your job, play to play, and to have the penalties and all the stuff, just some breakdowns go on that we obviously hadn't in the first 3 weeks of the season. So, it was disappointing. Kind of that was my message more than anything. I wasn't, yelling or anything. That was more about, hey, we have to get this fixed. And, you just try to come up with some of the, the whys things happen, and here's what we have to clean up. Here's how it happened, here's why it happened, and we can't do these things moving forward. So it's really more disappointment than anything.
How does Bobby's injury change what you guys do at corner?
Somebody else is going to play. Yeah, like I said, just every position. Whoever's up is going to be up, and we've been rolling different guys at different spots, and if Bobby's not available for us, then next man up's going to play, and we'll go play some ball.
How do you feel about McTire and Tankersley?
I feel fine. They've both been working hard. Torrey's got some work, last couple weeks and had some play time, and he's done a good job. And both of them on the practice field, again, we try to utilize our practice time for, different reps and kind of working guys in and making sure that guys are staying ready. And they've both been working hard, so I'm happy with that. And like I said, it's been the same story since week one, and we tell everybody in that room, if you're in this defensive meeting room, then you got to be ready to play when it's called on, and everyone's got to work to that goal and to that end. So I'm happy with the way they've been working in practice, and if their number's called, they'll be ready to go.
I know sophomore slumps are a real thing, but other than that, can you explain what's happened to Cordrea Tankersley?
Nothing's happened to him. I think, like I said, other guys have kind of played it better at times than him, and he's working and doing what we're asking him to do, and when he gets his opportunity, he'll be all right for us.
After the game, a couple of the players, especially defensive linemen, were talking about miscommunication, and I don't understand what they have to communicate about. Could you enlighten me?
I'll try. I can't speak to. I don't know what they're talking about. I wasn't there, so I don't want to. I never like to address hearsay, but. No, I don't know what you're referring to, what they're referring to, if that's the case. But everyone has to communicate, on game day. Even just from, again, obviously making a huddle call, making a front call, getting lined up. There's always, checks and things that happen in the course of a play, whether it's certain motions or things that trigger certain other calls. So, there's always communication between all levels of the defense. That's a starting point. And it has to be, there has to be over communication a lot of times. Everyone has to be on the same page. That's the worst thing that can happen if 8 guys are playing one thing and 3 guys thought they heard something else. That's when things, obviously can go really awry. So I didn't think that personally that was necessarily a huge issue, and that wasn't communicated back to me at all. So again, I can't address what they were referring to, but just in general, there's always communication going on every play. Again, between linebackers and D linemen, obviously in the secondary, and the linebackers have to get on the same page with coverage calls and checks, and even just from a starting point in terms of the Mike linebacker making a front call or setting the blitz or setting whatever we're doing. So I wouldn't say that was like a huge factor last week. There were a lot of other things going on.
The last couple of games, there have been a couple of plays where 2 or more wide receivers are bunched up and something happens, either the block at the line springs a guy, or people are, not covering Jordy Nelson.
Yeah.
Why is that happening?
Yeah, there's a good example of communication. I mean, anytime, not just in man coverage, anytime even we're in zone coverage or any matchup coverages, if, receivers get stacked or bunched or condensed splits and sort of switch release or come out of stacks like that, then, we have rules week to week on how we're picking that up. You know what I mean? So we've had some miscommunications there in terms of how we're handling some of that stuff. And we have a game plan every week, like, hey, in these calls, this is how we're handling this, or there's different ways to sort of sort it out. You know what I mean? And obviously we've miscommunicated a few of those in the last couple of weeks, so we got to clean that up.
Not getting too far ahead of the
Sure.
game, but all coaches self-scout throughout the season.
We do.
What is going well for you? What is not going well? And what do you think made you an
Jeez.
strength?
Man, I usually get I usually get myself scout on Fridays to go through it, but in general, obviously, like, our takeaways have been a huge factor of keeping us in games. Even last week, getting 2 picks. It's probably the only positive of the game last week. So I think that's, again, especially having been a point of emphasis. I think when we've kept our explosive plays down, like the games that we've done that, we've performed well in, and when we haven't, we've kind of been up against it a little bit. So, that's been kind of a critical factor for us. I think probably the biggest disappointment, I know I mentioned it last week, I feel like a broken record, has been third downs. We were actually decent last year in that, and obviously we spent a lot of time doing that. And, last week, kind of the penalties got us. But, we have a chance to go 3 and out in the first series of game and have a penalty on a third down. In the last 2 weeks, we've had, I think, 5, maybe 6 third down conversions on penalties. So, that's been disappointing from that sort of thing. So, I haven't studied much this week, but it's kind of early in the season to kind of really paint a big picture like that.
When you decide whether or not you're going to shadow a guy like AJ Green, what goes into
What do you mean shadow? Sorry.
Having a cornerback?
Oh, yeah, okay.
move with him?
Okay.
Do you not call that shadowing?
Well, I just didn't know. I want to make sure we're on the same page.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes.
What
I want
goes-
to speak your language.
What goes into the thought process about whether to do that and when to do that? Maybe third down, red zone. I mean, how do you as a defensive coordinator come to that conclusion?
Yeah, it's all that. Again, so you start the week and just, from a matchup standpoint, okay, just from a sort of a personnel standpoint, how do you match up? Do you like certain just like man-to-man matchups or those sort of things? That's sort of a base starting point. Is there a body type or a player that you like doing that with? And then it's also, as you start watching their schematic sort of attack, like, is it possible? Is it going to cause more confusion? Sometimes if there's a guy that they're motioning a lot and moving around a ton, like, it can kind of sway you against doing something like that, where if there's a guy that they're moving around, you're trying to flip guys all over the field. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine when, like, an offense moves 1 player and 7 guys on defense have to move spots just by that, you know what I mean? So there's some issues in terms of how you're doing that. And then same thing situationally. Like if there's certain players are targeting in certain situations, maybe that's a time to do something different. Obviously, when you have great players, you're going against great receivers, a guy like AJ. You always want to give different looks. You can't give static looks to any of those guys. At some point they're great players and their talent's going to show up. So you kind of maybe pick your spots on when you're doing certain things like that. So there's a lot of factors. Some of it's sort of again what their scheme is. Some of it's sort of what our scheme is. Some of it's a personnel matchup. Some of it's areas in the field. There's certain times when you kind of want to change some things up or spring some things on them. So there's a huge discussion every week and kind of how we want to approach that.
How do you approach that discussion with Xavien or cornerback?
Really, it's not. Usually it's not as much a factor in terms of directly with someone like that. With X, we'll look at it. But those guys are in here Monday. By the time they leave Monday, and we start really looking forward to the next week. We have all day Monday and Tuesday. Tony, Coach Oden, and myself. We'll kind of, as we've watched the tape and sit through it, we'll sort of start game planning and put our discussion together, saying, hey, is this something we want to do, or how do we want to utilize something like this, or hey, are we better right and left, or are we better left and right, or are we better however. And so, again, as the week kind of gets into the game plan week, we have a better idea of what our personnel is going to be. And now that we've sort of watched some of their, the opposing teams scheme and how they're utilizing certain players, we'll sort of try to get it fit up how we want to.
Is that pet peeve, I guess, on offensive movement that you mentioned with
Mm-hmm.
not when you guys run with one guy?
Yeah.
Is that why you like your corners to typically stay on their side?
No, I mean, that's not just about that. I mean, that's just sort of like in general. I think you see more of that if you have a defense. It's like partly why like we don't necessarily like flip our tackles and have like a 3 technique and a shade, like a nose or something like that, things like that, where they can trade a tight end and you have to move 10 bodies. Like then you're just going to see that all year long. You know what I mean? Like they're just going to get you unsettled by moving one guy. It's just easy for an offense to do, and then all of a sudden we're kind of have 10 guys moving around. Now your eyes are in the wrong spot. You're not settled when the ball snaps. So. We try to just utilize our rules where if they're just motioning one player, that we're either one guy's going with them or we're bumping something and just kind of moving spots. And we have, again, it's another thing week to week we'll look at and say, hey, this week they do a lot of this. So how do we want to handle this kind of motion? Do we want to match it and run across? Do we want to bump it, or certain calls and that sort of thing? So that's just, that's not really necessarily dictated by the corners per se. It's kind of just a schematic thing.
Now we saw snaps rise a lot for Jerome Baker this past week, last
Mm-hmm.
couple of weeks, in fact. Has what he's given you from a speed and activity standpoint outweighed any negatives from a girth or size standpoint?
Girth. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we like Bake's speed. We like that matchup in the passing game. Again, we've probably seen a little bit more, 11 personnel and open up type stuff the last couple of weeks, so that probably has a little bit of a factor. We've, the last 2 weeks we've faced good backs, good passing game backs. Number 30 in Oakland and James White last week and those sort of things. So sort of a different spot to utilize his skill set. So, I mean, it's, again, playing defense is it's by nature, it's a reactionary thing. We have to react to what an offense is giving us, in terms of personnel and formation and those sort of things. So playing times are sometimes dictated by that as much as anything else.
What are your memories of your tenure in Cincinnati?
My memories?
Yes.
Yeah, we had 2. I was there for 14-15. We had 2 good seasons. Made the playoffs both years. It was good. We had good teams, good defenses. Marvin, obviously, like working for Marvin as I don't even know how many years is he up to now. I can't even keep track. I mean, at the time it was, he'd been at 12, 13 years in the league as a head coach, and so it was good to learn from him and see how he operated. It was good to be around. I was kind of laugh, like I've had 4 head coaches in my NFL career, and 2 of them were like the longest tenured coaches in the league, between Jeff Fisher and Marvin, and then 2 of them were first-time head coaches in Jim and Adam. So it was kind of just cool. I'd been with Jeff and then was with Jim for 5 years in Detroit, and then to go with Marvin and kind of just see how he operated, and it was kind of the first time I'd been out of that family, with the Fisher and Schwartz kind of lineage. It was the first time I kind of broken out of that a little bit, and so it was good to see kind of Marvin, and it's a unique place. It's kind of a family-run business, and how they operate, and so I learned a lot from Marvin. I learned a lot from that organization. I learned a lot of football there, and we had 2 good seasons, and unfortunately both ended in playoff disappointment. But I enjoyed my time there. I grew as a football coach and learned a lot of ball.
Matt, what are your thoughts on things not working out between you guys and Jordan Phillips?
I don't really have any thoughts on it. Things didn't work out, and organization moved on, and I'm sure he's moved on, and we'll both go try to get a win this weekend. Oh, whoa! I thought that was like my cue. I was close.
How often in the last 2 years has X lobbied to shadow opposing receiver?
X is a extremely confident player. He wants to do it every game, every play, every game, and even if you do it, he gets mad if you give him help. Literally, he's like, leave me alone type of thing. So he lobbies all the time for it, which I love. Now that's not always the best strategy, so he doesn't always get what he wants. But again, you want your corners, especially guys that, playmaking corners, you want them to be confident, and he is, and he wants to go against the best, and he wants to match up against the best. He wants to, he views himself in that category, and he wants to perform on that stage. So he pretty much every week wants to do it, and obviously especially when you're going against, really good players like we're about to go against. But again, I mean, this offense isn't just about A.J. Green, what I mean? So there's other factors. We can't just say, oh, we're going to put 10 guys on A.J. Green, or we're going to flip this guy and always do this. I mean, this is a good offense, and they've got other playmakers that we have to account for. So, he's got to just play within our scheme, and he'll do what we'll ask him to do.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, good. All right, guys.